Today we have Mr. Dale Deville of Flathead 8, the Dale Rods, and I'm sure a bunch of other projects previously. Um, Dale, what have you been up to?
Living life, man. Trying to find that balance between work and family and still getting out to play some music and have some fun and hang out with friends. That's where I'm at.
That's right. And you've been working so many hours, you've barely been playing.
That is correct. Yes, we got a lot of stuff going on at work right now. Unfortunately, I do have to stay out of town every once in a while, and it's been pretty constant for like the last month. So we had some big projects and we had some big mistakes at work that other contractors made that I had to help clean up. So that's hopefully coming to an end, and I get to smooth right back into Monday afternoon jam sessions with the Dale Rods.
Right. And you've been doing general maintenance and technician work for how many years would you say?
I would say professionally, like going on 15 years. I was raised in a farm community, raised on farm, in a small town. So we grew up doing everything ourselves. If something needed fixed, then we had that mentality that we couldn't always pay somebody else to do it. So we fixed a lot of our own things, and we were self-sufficient, and that's kind of the way we grew up, and I'm still kind of that way now. So it was easy for me to slide into like a maintenance kind of repairing position because I had that experience growing up.
Well, and speaking of, hands-on stuff like that, I heard a rumor that you did the pinstriping on Ryan Carpenter's Butterscotch Blonde Telecaster. Is that true?
So that's not true. Ryan Carpenter's Butterscotch Blonde Telecaster used to be my Telecaster. I had a guy here in town named Dave Smith pinstripe that years ago. He's an old hot rod guy, paints and pinstripes, and I had him pinstripe my guitar, and I think he charged me like $30 years ago. Which if you had a professional artist do it, it'd be several $100s. But yeah, I unfortunately I love the Telecaster, but I love the Gretsch guitar even more. So I focus on that, and I rarely played that Telecaster. And when you have a small child at home, and sometimes you have to give some things up to make other things happen. So I sold the Telecaster to Carpy.
Right.
And so he's the proud owner of that now. So almost right, but yeah.
That's good. And so the same guy probably pinstriped the Setzer then, right?
No, actually, when I lived in Memphis, I was doing a lot of mountain biking, and my mountain bike mechanic, he had a shop right next door to an auto body shop, and I met some people over there. I met this girl and her husband. Her name's Tiffany, and she got into pinstriping, and she got really good, and now she's into tattoo art and all this stuff. And she actually comes up here for the 420 over at the other side celebration every year that the Creepers put on, and she pinstripes and does some tattoo work. But yeah, I had her pinstripe that when I lived in Memphis.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, the Brian Setzer is a model of Gretsch hollow body, and yours has two pickups, right? I know I've seen ones with one pickup, right. So two pickups. And do you have tone knobs, or do you just have a volume?
No, just a volume and the pickup selector. So it's pretty bare bones. It's bare bones and all tone.
Works for what you need it for, though.
Yeah, it really does. And it actually is, for as simple as it is, it's very versatile. A guy told me a long time ago that tone is in your right hand, right? So you can, if you're a decent enough musician and have that kind of skill, then you can pick up, like a Hello Kitty guitar and make it sound decent, right?
Right.
So that, with that Gretsch, it's really versatile, and as simple as it is, that I can get a lot of different sounds out of it, amazingly, and with very few pedals or effects or anything like that.
Well, and you played a Chet Atkins recently at the music store. In comparison, how would you say that your Brian Setzer hot rod compares to the Chet Atkins?
I thought about that when I was playing that, and I also played the
Silver Falcon.
Right, that Falcon. And I thought about that, like, how does this compare to what I normally play? And the only way I could really think of it is like high-end vehicles. Like this is a Ferrari, this is a Lamborghini, this is a Bugatti, right?
Right.
They're all high-end vehicles. They have their own little differences, idiosyncrasies that make them a little bit different. But I played my Brian Setzer for so long that it's honestly, it was my favorite out of them. If I played the other two more, I would probably favor maybe that Falcon.
And did you have a certain artist growing up that made you want to get a Gretsch over like a Fender Strat?
Yes and no. It was more. I learned that genre of music, like I kind of got more into like rockabilly and punk and things like that before I even really knew what the kind of guitars they were playing. My first couple guitars were Fender acoustics, and then I had a Gibson knockoff, an Ibanez Gibson knockoff,
Oh wow, the Les Paul.
the 335.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was Ibanez Art Core, I think is what the model was. So that was pretty cool. So that kind of got me into that whole genre of like a hollow body or semi hollow body. But honestly, I grew up. My grandma was a concert pianist and taught piano, and so I grew up with like Chopin and Tchaikovsky and Beethoven and Liszt and Mozart and all that stuff growing up. And my mom was kind of this maybe degenerate hippie from the 50s and 60s. So I got a lot of Janis Joplin, a lot of the Doors from her, but also like Zeppelin and a lot of Rolling Stones, and even more so like a lot of blues, everything from R&B, Aretha Franklin, Diana Ross and the Supremes, and that was kind of my two. I had classical music, and then I had all this other stuff from my mom, like classic rock and R&B and soul and stuff. And I never did really get into rockabilly or country. Like I hated country music growing up. I absolutely hated it. And like I can honestly say right now that like 70s country music's probably my favorite genre. Some of my favorite stuff to listen to, just the storytelling and things of that genre. But I think that really got me into rockabilly music was I was here in Kearney, and a buddy said, "Hey, we got to go down and check this band out." And it was the Reverend Horton Heat. And the Reverend Horton Heat, for those who don't know, is this guy's been doing his thing since the early '80s. He is a monster guitar player, an incredible songwriter, and an incredible vocalist. And I saw this show, and it almost, I had like this epiphany. It changed my life. I'm like, what is this music? I mean, what am I listening to? And this was back when, I'm aging myself a little bit, but you couldn't just get on your phone and Google something because that did not exist. This was like back in the late '90s when I first saw the Reverend Horton Heat. I was probably maybe 21, 22 years old, and I got turned on to that kind of music. And about that same time, I think, I remember seeing La Bamba, the movie La Bamba when I was a kid, the movie about Richie Valens and the Big Bopper and all these different guys were in this movie. But Brian Setzer played the Big Bopper in this movie and played Summertime Blues. And it was like another kind of pivotal moment. Like, I really want to get into this kind of music. And that's when I started listening to a lot of Brian Setzer and like Stray Cats stuff, which got me into Gretsch guitars. And like, oh, this guy has his own signature guitar. And eventually I was fortunate enough to be in the position I had $3,500 and I was able to buy it. It was a lot of money, still is a lot of money, for a guitar. But yeah, so that's kind of the story behind that.
Well, that's cool. Do you have any like really big love for things like, Eddie Cochran, any of that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, yep, absolutely. Getting into I kind of did things in reverse. I found out about like the Reverend Horton Heat and Brian Setzer, who are more modern players.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where's this come from? Eddie Cochran and Dwayne Eddy and all these guys.
Oh, yeah.
That's where all this sound came from. And I started, just kind of going back in time. And like I said, man, this was a lot of years ago, so you couldn't just get on YouTube and type something in. You had to it was like a treasure hunt. You know, I remember one time I was in a video store and there was a VHS tape and it was learn to play guitar like rockabilly guitar or something. And it had a picture of Brian Setzer and some of these other guys on it. And man, I bought that. It was like $11 and I bought this VHS tape and I played that thing over and over and over. So, I mean, it was, like I said, everything's so easy now. It's like, hey, did you hear this band? I'm like, yeah, let me push buttons on my phone and yeah, I'll know everything about it. So, but yeah, I kind of went in reverse and learned about learned about older music through the modern players and by doing research, I guess.
Speaking of older music through the modern players, you guys are modern players that play older music, considering both of your bands. Would you say, like a group like Flathead 8, what really brings you guys together as the powerful three-piece that you are?
Man, by the grace of God, I tell you what, it was those two guys that I play with, Micah and Matt. I don't think I could find better bandmates. And we've not grown apart, but we've all grown up to the point where, you know, we all have kids now. We have families, and priorities have to change, you know, when those things come along. I'm still fortunate to play with those guys we play out a few times a year, and get together. But so Micah, he's from Ravenna, and I've known him for years. We've ridden motorcycles together for years. We've drank together for a lot of years. And so I was in a band here in Kearney called the Hacks. And it was just kind of a ragtag group of guys, and we wanted to play some music. I started by, I had a friend, his name was Jeff, and he was teaching guitar at Yonda's. And I had been playing the guitar for a long time, but I just felt like I'd plateaued and I wanted to reach out. So I said, hey, I want to learn to play the guitar. And I took 2 lessons from this guy, and he says, can you sing? I'm like, well, yeah, I sing all the time in the shower. And he said, well, let's start a band. I'm like, I've had 2 guitar lessons from this guy, and I just met him, you know. I think he was an acquaintance through my ex-wife. And he said, well, let's start a band. So he got these other 2 guys together, and we came over to my basement, and we just started playing. And we played, our first show was, we opened for the Darts, and we played with the Darts for years, like 3 or 4 years with this band. We were very seldom not playing together. You know, it was always the Hacks and the Darts, or the Darts and the Hacks. And so I spent a lot of time playing with those guys. But like everything, you know, we grew and things changed, and the kind of music we were playing was really cool, but it was not what I wanted to do. We were like a rock band with some rockabilly flavor, but it just wasn't. You know, we played like a lot of Stevie Ray Vaughan style Texas blues and stuff, and it just wasn't really what I was into. So, and I was honest with the guys. I'm like, you know what I really want to do is I want to play in a 3-piece rockabilly band, and I didn't know how to do that. But the Hacks, that band, we fell off a little bit. And I was talking to my buddy Micah, and he was actually playing the pedal steel, and he was coming over to my house, and we were playing some Wayne the Train Hancock and some Hank 3 older style stuff, you know, thunderstorms and neon signs, just like me playing an acoustic guitar and him on the pedal steel. And I just really wanted a rockabilly band. I couldn't find an upright bass player. I found a few drummers. So what I did was I got online, and I found one of the cheapest upright basses that I could find. It was about $700, and I bought it. It shipped to my house, and Micah came over to the house, and I said, "There's your new instrument. Learn it." And within a couple weeks, he's a fantastic musician. He's one of those guys that I hate, that he can pick up an instrument and just start playing it, and it irritates me because I have to work for everything that I do. So that was kind of the start of that. He picked it up and just went to clacking away on this thing, and he was working at the landfill at the time, and he knew a guy up there who was a metal drummer. He played for Ninefall and a couple other metal bands back in the 90s, but he was a straight up metal, like double kick metal drummer, and he came over and set his stuff up, and we played a couple times, and we instantly gelled. You know, Micah and I had always been friends, but Matt, he fit right in there, and it's, even if we weren't in a band together, we would still be really good friends and do things together all the time. But we had that love of music, and those guys are incredible. We're all capable musicians, really capable musicians, and we just gelled together. So that's kind of how I got my rockabilly band. I bought an upright bass and I made somebody learn how to play it, and I brought a metal drummer in, and with he has some fills that he, you know, pulls out of his metal bag and throws them in on stuff it's just amazing. He's the heart and soul. He's the beat of the. He's the guy I would call our tech nerd, you know, because that's just his personality. But I've sat in with a lot of bands, and sometimes it goes really good, and sometimes you're like, you know, you got some nerves and stuff. But I get up on stage with Matt and Micah, but Matt most of all, and like I tell him, like, I can do magic things when you're up here, when I'm playing music with you, and I really feel like that. And I don't know how I got so lucky with these three guys, but the stuff that we do together, it's amazing. And we can play a song a couple times, and to me, the sign of a good musician is you listen to the other musicians you're playing with, and those guys do an excellent job of that, especially Matt. And we can play a song a couple times, and it's what I can, you know, it's tight. You know, we feel like we're tight. I don't like to throw that word around a lot because I describe awesome bands as, oh, that's a tight band, but you know, that's kind of how I feel about us, and it's a lot of it's personality based. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys opened for the Hillbilly Casino from Tennessee recently, and I saw your show. So I would agree that I think you guys are a very tight band. And he really shocked me too, because I think that they backlined their kit for you, right?
Yes.
So on my kit for Marion Gun and the Wanted Ones, I have, 3. I would have a fourth tom if I could. I just don't have that kind of setup. But I like having more drums, and I was amazed at how well he did just adapting to that much smaller kit and how well he used it.
He may have a preference, but he's the type of person who would never say that. And if there was a band like with Hillbilly Casino, like, hey, you want to use this kit? He has no problem with that. It may not be his preference, but he's going to do it, and he's going to make it not just work, but he's going to make it sound just as good as if he had his kit.
Sure.
I do. There are some certain things on certain songs where I know he does on his kit that if he's playing someone else's kit and he doesn't play that, I'll turn around and look at him and just give him that look, and we kind of smile at each other. So.
Band stuff.
Yeah, band stuff.
Well, and 2, you mentioned the darts, and I love the darts, but I found them this year. I kind of lost music for a while, and the darts happened to be that rock and roll I needed to find music again.
Yeah.
You played with them, long ago. Was their set similar to like what it is now? Were they playing like 6th Street Summer and Speaking in Tongue and all that back then, or was it different back then?
They like everyone, they have evolved, but they had the reason they're so good is because they're all 3 super solid guys and extraordinary musicians, but they had a solid base of music that they wanted to play, a mix of covers and stuff that they had written, that gave them a platform to grow on. Like, I'm not sure when 6th Street Summer was written, but it was the 3 of them took a trip down to Austin, and 6th Street down in Austin, that's where they wrote that song. So there's a few that came a little later, but they evolved. I don't think that they got any better, because from the first time I've seen those guys, they were phenomenal. They've always blown my mind. Jack's a phenomenal guitar player and singer, and Matty, I think if you put him behind a kit and tell him what you're going to play, he'll be able to play it. And Waylon is one of the most creative minds, and phenomenal. He's another guy who he can pick up any musical instrument and play it and irritate me because I can't play it, So they have evolved, but they evolved, I think, from greatness.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Matty was an interesting guy. I ran into him at Joe's Honky Tonk one night, but I had seen the darts, 3 years ago before that, at a Rock and Rods show.
Yeah.
I had seen the darts, and I didn't totally get Matty at first, but he just turned out to be a super fun guy. That's a good group of dudes. They have really good music.
Yeah, they do, and they've entrenched themselves in the music scene and music culture around Nebraska. I mean, they've traveled further out than Nebraska, but they're there's you could go to a bar, I'm sure, up in Valentine, up in the Sandhills, and mention the Darts, and like they'd say, oh yeah, they played here years ago.
Yeah.
They got around, and even before I had a band, and I knew I was always very envious of those guys, especially friends of mine who had a band. There's the Darts and my other friend Bill Saba, who you know he had a rockabilly band called Tres Diablos back in the day, and they played with the Darts quite a bit. And I saw those guys, and I was so jealous of those guys. That's because they were doing exactly what I wanted to do. And their guitar player was he was I guess maybe a typical guitar player. He was a little edgy, a little arrogant, this and that, but just a phenomenal guitar player. And he was one of the first guys I saw live who could finger pick, like what I guess I'd call like Travis picking, or Chet Atkins style picking, where you're picking with a pick with your pick fingers, but you're also picking the higher notes with your pinky and ring and middle finger and whatnot. So I saw him do that, and I'm like, man, I really want to do that. And I did. I went home and I practiced, and that's one thing that I am proud of myself for making myself do. I wanted to learn to pick like that, and I did. And there are some, it blows people's minds a lot of times that if somebody who hasn't heard that kind of music or seen how that kind of music is played, to where you're almost kind of playing two songs at once sometimes, and it blows people's minds. So nowhere near the Merle Travis or Chet or anything like that, but practice.
That's a big skill, getting the bass notes in there while you're picking the higher strings. That's just crazy. What were some other big bands at the time that you were, I guess, able to play more shows frequently that we might not know of?
I love all kinds of music. I'm not big on pop country, so I have a huge music collection. And once the internet came along, it was great that you could listen and find anything. But the bands that really always trip my trigger, that I always hold on to, that are the most impressive to me, have always been less famous touring bands who come out to these dives or bars and do it every night. And that's where I've always had a really good work ethic, but I started seeing that work ethic in other musicians when they play and do things, and those are kind of the bands that I really drew to. Hillbilly Casino was one. The legendary Shack Shakers, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they're another one. They're a touring band that kind of Americana roots, punk, rockabilly type stuff. But as far as like known bands, I've always been into, heavy metal and, Metallica, Pantera, and Iron Maiden, stuff like that. I'm really into anything that sounds good, but the thing that I really enjoy most is finding somebody like Unknown Hinson, who a lot of people wouldn't really know about because they're not really in that kind of scene. I didn't know about his TV voice stuff until well after I knew of him as a musician and like the phenomenal guitar player he is. So that, those maybe lesser known phenomenal musicians are the ones that I'm really into. Him, for example.
What about for the Dale Rods? How has all of these musicians, all of these shows you've played, etc., kind of inspired the Dale Rods, which is a lot more recent band, I understand?
Well, it's interesting. My first thoughts about the Dale Rods were kind of what J-Rod and I started out doing. I wanted to do smaller venues. Our first few shows were smaller, small bars out of town in these, like up in Hazard and Pleasanton, towns of just a couple hundred people, and depending on, trying to get a small town crowd in there. I really wanted this project, and it's turning out to be this way, to be like just a low key, have fun singing some songs that we've always wanted to sing, but maybe haven't been able to because of the projects we were in. Say, maybe Flathead 8. There's some stuff that doesn't necessarily fit, but I still think that it's great music and they're great fun songs. And the same with J-Rod. With J-Rod's string band, that's, it's a string band, and there's just certain things you can't encompass with that. So I think kind of for both of us, we talked about this, that we're doing a project that is more for us, and we want to play some songs that we haven't been able to play previously, and also throw some original stuff in there too, which we're starting to get some more original stuff in there too. I wanted to use this as an opportunity to write some more original music that's not like rockabilly or punk or country based, but maybe more, I don't know, it's more music that I can't really pigeonhole into a genre. Maybe, some of my original songs are not really, like a couple of the ballads, they're not really country, not really rock. I just can't really place them, but I just think they're kind of good songs, So that's the kind of stuff I wanted to play with the Dale Rods, and like everything, and it's evolving already. We're adding players. We talked in the beginning, like, yeah, let's just do this two-man deal, and it was just going to be acoustic guitars, and then I started playing my electric guitar, and then we started playing some things, and we're like, you know what? Drums would sound really good right here. And then like a bass would sound really good right here. So we're kind of gearing more towards maybe a fuller band, but still doing some songs that we want to do, and not adhering to maybe some sort of like, well, what kind of music do they play? Well, everything. Like we play some old Waylon Jennings songs. We play a Clash, some Clash tunes. Play some punk. We play some, we do a Michael Jackson song, some Chris Isaac. So it's all over the place. But when you listen to the way we translate these songs, it's comes out in our voice. As the Dale Rods. We make it our own, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. You've just kind of rooted yourself well in music and in Kearney. I mean, but how long have you actually been in Kearney? And was it consistent?
So I grew up in Pleasanton, 20 miles north of here. I lived there till I was 18, between my grandparents' farmhouse and the little in-town house. Came to college here, and I studied criminal justice, and went to work up at the Boys Training School, or YRTC, Youth Rehabilitation and Treatment Center. I was a youth counsel up there for about 6 years, and that was kind of the time when, I guess maybe I've always really been into music, and like I said, my grandma was a piano teacher, and they tried to force me to take piano lessons, which I now wish that I would have, but I was so obstinate as a kid, like, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to have anything to do with it. So I distanced myself from learning to play music. I was just in love with music. So the time I was in my early 20s I was working for the Department of Corrections, and a lot of things started changing for me. I wanted to start playing music, so I did. I got a guitar, and but I was unhappy with what I was doing, so I got into kind of what I'm doing now, like mechanics and things like that. Lived in Kearney for, after I moved to town from Pleasanton, I lived in Kearney for probably 10 or 12 years, and met my old lady, who I'm still with now. And one day we were sitting around, and I'd been thinking about getting out of Kearney for a long time. And this is this is all after the hacks, and I'd been playing with Flathead 8 for several years. We were not at a lull, but we were just kind of doing our thing over and over. Maybe not really adding anything new. Maybe in a lull a little bit, but I needed to change a venue, not just with. I needed to get out of Nebraska, so I asked the old lady if she wanted to move to Tennessee, and she said yes, and we moved to Memphis, where Memphis is an incredible music city. A lot of people obviously know, Elvis was from Memphis. Johnny Cash got his start in Memphis, Carl Perkins, but also, that was down at Sun Studio. Sam Phillips and Sun Studio had just an incredible history of music there with the players, but it was pretty specific to, the Elvis and Johnny Cash and stuff like that, and Roy Orbison. And then I found Stax Records, and that place changed my life. Between Stax Records in Memphis and Muscle Shoals in Alabama, those two places, with like the R&B and even country, like Willie Nelson recorded at both places, Bob Seger recorded at both places, but it was a lot of R&B and soul, and especially there at Stax. The list of names in the R&B music and soul from that time it goes on and on and on, and Memphis is really rooted in blues and soul and that kind of music. And anytime anybody would come to town to visit, I would take them down to Stax Records and Sun Studio, because I wanted to share this experience. And some people had that experience, and some people didn't. I took a couple guys into Stax Records, and they were in tears by the time they were leaving, just because of the, there's a lot of heavy stuff in there, man. There's a lot of history and a lot of emotions. And we lived in Memphis for several years, but Memphis is a rough place, man. Really, it's a gang-ridden, lots of crime. We heard gunshots every night. I mean, every night we'd hear gunshots. Speaking of Matson, he brought his old lady at the time. They were not married, and their first kid down for Thanksgiving. And we were all out in the backyard, and right across the street, somebody shot up the house, and kind of ruined his trip to Memphis. But it was a rough place. So we eventually decided to get out of there. We thought about moving to a few different places. I wanted to move to another music city, so we moved to Austin, Texas, and I got to play a little bit of music down there. And I was still working in the maintenance game. It kept me busy. We were in Austin for a few years, and then found out that we were going to have a kid, and did not want to raise our kid in a big city, so moved back to small town Nebraska, back into my grandparents' old farmhouse, and I've been back here for about 3 years. And so I guess the long answer to your question, I've lived around Kearney, growing up until I was into my 30s, and then moved away and just moved back. So.
Have you guys thought about moving anywhere else, towards the end of big working, more into retirement? Have you thought about moving states or moving towns again, or just kind of staying where you're at?
Yeah, so I mean, we're, with the kid, we're obviously rooted for some time. I want him to have stability here, and I live in a good community. I live on this little farm outside of town of a 300 population town, and it's nothing happens other than good stuff, and good school and things like that. And so that's what we wanted for him. We were not going to stay in Austin indefinitely, but I was, until we found out we were going to have a kid, I was never going to move back to Nebraska, ever, never, ever. There was just too much out there for us to go do. We have talked, when he's older, in his teens, if things are right, then yeah, I would definitely consider moving again. The next move I'm going to make will be, I'll probably be close to 60 some years old. So my next move will probably be my last move, and it will be to a cabin with with a lake or stream or something outside on the hillside of a mountain, and I won't have any neighbors, hopefully. So that's ultimately the dream or goal, and the old lady's down with that too, but we'll see.
That's cool. Do you have a fully musical household, to take with you? Is it, the kid musical and is the wife musical?
So my wife is not, but my kid is very into music. He loves to beat on my guitars. He's always been into percussive type things. Maddie, we're getting a small kit from Maddie, so we'll have a kit, a drum kit, and I recently put a piano back into the house. It's like I said, living in my grandparents' old house, and my grandma had a studio upright piano out in the den where she would teach lessons. But in the living room, where I have my big sectional couch now, there was a baby grand piano, and man, I so many fond memories laying underneath that grand piano and listening to her pound out Chopin and Beethoven, and absolutely loved it. But I got a piano in the house now, and he absolutely loves playing on that too. So I think I have a musician in the making.
That's good. I think every family kind of does at some point. Someone in there's likes music. So
Yeah.
enough to pick it up at least.
So I do come from a music, like I said, my grandma she taught piano, and she could have been a concert pianist, but met my grandpa pre-World War II, and she became a housewife, which she always talked about. She said she always wanted to be a traveling pianist until she met my grandpa. She said, and that everything changed. She just wanted to have a family. So I grew up with her, being a piano, being a piano teacher and having that in the household all the time. At home, my parents were divorced. My old man, he took off when I was a baby, but he took off to go play music. He was a guitar player. He played with a couple local bands around here in Kearney. Didn't amount to much of anything, but my grandmother on his side, she was also a musician, played the piano and sang. So I do have some family history of musicians.
So what can you tell us about the climate of growing up when you grew up versus growing up now? Now that we're kind of talking about that time frame.
It's night and day difference. I was born in the late '70s and I grew up in the '80s, and I would be considered what you would call a latchkey kid. Only we never had keys because nobody locked their houses. I don't even know if we ever had a house key. Nobody locked their vehicles. Like I said, I was in a small town of 300 people, and a lot of those people kind of lived out in the outline. So there was like 180 kids in my entire high school, in the entire school. So it was a very small. The thing about a small town, you can't really get away with anything. You have a lot of parents. Everybody parents everybody else's kids type of deal. I feel very fortunate for the place and time that I grew up, especially looking now and living in places like Memphis and Austin, and Memphis with the crime. Like I couldn't fathom bringing a kid in the world and expecting them to live somewhere you hear gunshots and you're looking over your shoulder all the time. Or even Austin, it doesn't have the crime, but it has. Austin is so politically charged, and without getting into all that, it's almost just as bad as having a high crime rate with all this politically charged, and like the homeless situation. And I don't know if either of you been to Austin, but there's nothing but homeless people in Austin, and it's turned into a trashy place. So I feel very fortunate for the growing up in the time period and the place that I did, and comparing that to now, I can't even wrap my head around what kids are doing these days. I feel like I'm talking like an old man, right? Which I'm getting there, but I don't understand kids or the younger generation. I didn't have my first cell phone until, man, I don't think I was I might have been 18 or 19 years old. I know I was in like my first year of college, and it was a big deal. Not everybody had cell phones, and now you go walk into any restaurant, and entire families are just sitting there scrolling on their phone. Little kids scrolling on their phones, and it just makes me feel more fortunate for how I grew up. And I we grew up hard. We didn't have any money, and mom was divorced, and my mom got married and divorced like 7 times. So we had this constant kind of in and out of these stepdads, and sometimes it was pretty volatile and a lot of anger and a lot of that troublesome stuff with broken families. I was really fortunate that my mom's second husband they got married and divorced a couple times. They're not together now, and they haven't been for 40 some years, but he's always been my dad. Like, I've always considered he's my stepdad, but it's not even like, that's my dad, like, no different than having a biological dad to me. He always took care of me like I was his own son. So I see a lot of kids don't have that. I know that divorce rate is exponentially higher, but kids don't have a lot of positive parent at home, I don't think, anymore. And it's troublesome to me, getting older. It's crazy the things you start thinking of when you're getting older, man. I never would have thought I'd be talking about this kind of stuff.
Well, it's tricky too. The internet really, what should have been a good thing, and started as government technology, really kind of exploded into something that started almost controlling people, because anyone can put anything on the internet and anyone can read anything that got put there. So it's just kind of a whole spiral out of control ordeal, depending on which way you go.
Right. And then where do you start and stop regulations? I mean,
Yeah, there's privacy and all that, and there's all kinds of ways you could go about it.
Yeah. So I just tried to, thinking about the upbringing that I had, I try to mimic that or mirror that for my kid. I know I'm obviously not a perfect person, and I have issues also, but I try to keep things in check for another human being. It's a strange thing to do. You're a lone wolf all your life. Now you have this little human following you around. It's something else, man.
Yeah.
So I've had to reel myself in and put some things in check, and I just try to focus a lot on giving my kid the upbringing that I had, minus the ass beatings from stepdads. So yeah.
Well, so you're putting in a lot of hours, but what did it take to get to all these hours where you're giving, your family, and I would say probably a better life than maybe where you had started? Did you go through an apprenticeship, or did you go through any major schooling after you graduated to get to this point with your skills?
Nope. So there's 2 ways to get into what I call the trades. Plumbing, electrical, carpentry, anything like that you would consider the trades. You can go to trade school, or you can just go learn how to do it. You can be an apprentice, or like in my situation, it's like, hey, do you know how to fix a toilet? Well, yeah, I've fixed toilets all my life. I've had to. We had no other choice. We didn't have the money to call a plumber. So all of my knowledge from the time I started, was based basically on survival. Fixing my own car, or this is broken, I need to figure out how to fix it. So I had a really good opportunity when I was living in Memphis. I was working as just kind of a maintenance guy, but I was working at the CDC. It was a government contract. I was working in a 300,000 square foot distribution center, and they distributed all of the flu drug and measles, mumps, rubella vaccinations for kids. That's what that place did. There was another engineer there, a maintenance guy, who kind of took me under the wing and showed me the ropes of real commercial maintenance, what's really important, and what I really needed to learn about. And I spent about 5 years with him, learning everything I could about how to fix stuff that I didn't know how to fix. We had a lot of conveyor belts there that, ran off of rubber bands and optic sensors. And man, I got to be real good friends with those things, stuff like that. We had, the average maintenance guy like myself might have to go, um, you know, might have to change some filters on an air conditioning unit or change a coil or a capacitor or something like that, which kind of standard stuff. Well, where I was at the CDC, we had 5,000 square feet of 22 below freezer, and we had 45,000 square feet of refrigerated area that had to maintain certain temperatures. So it got more technical. The more you learn, the more responsibility that you undertake, and when you take on that more responsibility, your skill set grows. And I've been doing this long enough to where I have a pretty wide skill set, and it's almost a detriment because I have other technicians calling me constantly all day long, like, "Hey, I can't get this blah 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 to whatever," So I've spent a lot of time gaining knowledge and experience, and that's how you do it in that job. I think you can go to trade school, but they're only going to teach you so much. You have to put your hands on this stuff and physically tear stuff apart and physically get dirty and put your hands in toilets and things like that. So it's a means to an end. It's not always fun for me. Sometimes it is. Would I want to do something else? Yeah, sure. But it really fits my skill set, and the trades it pays really good if you have experience. And being I support a family of 3, so I just kind of put my nose down and just keep going until until I win the lottery. But I don't play the lottery, so I probably won't win.
You never know.
Yeah.
Well, you've got a show coming up on the 2nd
Yes.
of next month, which is November.
Next Saturday.
Yeah.
A week from Saturday.
And I've just seen the Hoot and Hollers, but I saw them separately from you. Is there any special treats or anything that we could expect to receive for your opening of the show?
It's always a treat when you get to hear Flathead 8.
I agree.
No, I had a friend a long time ago say he tried to curse us, and he said, "You're going to have a train wreck of a show. You really are." And I'm still waiting, knock on wood, I'm still waiting for it with Flathead 8. We've had some rough times, but other bands I've had like I don't want to say disasters, but like train wrecks. But we get together and we know what we're supposed to do, and we know if we want to have fun and have everybody else have a good time, then this is what we need to do. And I think that's what people get when they come see a Flathead 8 show.
Yeah.
It's the same every time, and it's not terrible, it's not fantastic, it's just really, really good.
I like that. It doesn't undermine you guys, but it doesn't, overhype it, I guess.
Right.
So.
Right. We just try to have fun, and when we have fun, other people have fun. And we offer some music that is not mainstream, or at least not today mainstream.
Yeah.
We do play a little newer music, but it's nothing you would probably ever hear on any radio station. A lot of songs that you'd maybe never heard before. We play some songs that we've taken and made our own, and they're to where they're almost unrecognizable until you catch a tagline or something like, "Oh, this is this song."
Right.
So there's that, and then the Hoot and Hollers immediately after us. I've seen them all over the United States. I've seen them in Tennessee. I've seen them in Missouri. I've seen them in Nebraska and Texas and Kansas, and they are another one. Like, they're not going to have a bad night. They're there to entertain and have a good time, and they want other people to have a good time.
Well, good. Then we're going to have a great time. Something gear related too, on a side note, I noticed the Hoot and Hollers are big on those Reverend guitars,
Mm-hmm.
and when Daikaiju came through, they were also big on Reverend guitars. Were those a big deal when you were shopping guitars?
No, no. And the only real draw I have to Reverend guitars, I mean, Jack plays a Reverend, and it sounds phenomenal. I've just never been into that style of guitar, but one of my favorite bands, they're out of Detroit. They're called the Coffin Cats, and Tommy Coffin, the guitar player, has a signature Reverend,
That's right.
and it's badass. So I mean, I'd play one.
Well, that's cool. No, I was just curious there. I was thinking too, you guys have another show, the Dale Rods, I'm assuming even possibly as a full band in January.
Yes.
With Mikey Strongman. Who is Mikey Strongman, for those who don't know?
Mikey Strongman is, I don't know how to explain it. Singer songwriter. I haven't heard a lot of his stuff. I honestly, I had to look him up, and was pleasantly surprised. So yeah, come out, you'll find out.
Yeah, that's one I haven't heard of yet. I hadn't really heard that much of Johnny V either, but I saw him at Ponst October here this last weekend, and so I didn't know if that's kind of what I should be imagining, or
No, he's a little. Mikey is a little more mellow.
Sure.
A little more. I mean, I don't like comparing anybody to anybody, but
right.
When I first heard a couple of his songs, I'm like, oh, kind of Neil Youngish.
Okay,
maybe.
okay. That's a good
but
comparison.
but just maybe. So yeah,
I'll take that.
yeah, and hopefully a full band.
Hopefully a full band. So sounds like you've got some good players on your roster, including
Yes.
the J Rod.
Yeah.
Well, what else do you have going on for you coming up? Anything? Any surprises?
Any surprises? Not that I can think of. Got a lot of yard work to do at home. I've been cutting wood for the winter, like an old farm guy.
Do you guys have a wood stove, a functional wood stove?
I do have a functional wood stove.
And you use it?
I do. It actually it's out in my den. The house I live in, my grandparents, when my grandpa retired from the Navy, they moved back to Nebraska, and they bought this house, and it was just a small little kind of square looking farmhouse that was built in 1902, I believe. And that was in the 60s, 67 when he bought it. And for the next 20 years, he kind of renovated and added on to the house. But it was interesting because he just made it longer. So he built a porch and then a den and then a couple garages and whatnot. But the den is where it all happens. That's the musical center, I guess you would call it.
Yeah. So, Dale, aside from musical accomplishments, do you have anything that you did either now, in the middle, or when you were young that was a big deal for you? Anything you were involved in, even?
I won the spelling bee in 6th grade, and I got to go to the county spelling bee for a chance to go to state, but I didn't make it past the county spelling bee. I misspelled Heighten, Heighten, Heighten. So yeah,
That's okay.
that was an early accomplishment. I was in Scouts. My best friend growing up, who just recently retired from the military for 22 years. His mom was our den leader, so it was a weird experience, but it was still really cool because she was very very proactive with it, and everything through the book, but also like she had us doing all sorts of other stuff too. And being in a small rural area, there was, the town I grew up in is on a river. So there was always going to the river or going out to, there's an old ghost town at the bottom of this bluff that's called Sartor Bluff. So we'd go out there, do some scout stuff out there. So yeah, that was fun. We did that for several years, I think, and ultimately, I think our den leader, she got to the point she couldn't do it anymore, and we got into other things too. So I that's also I love Scouts, but it's also I wish that I would have had the fortitude to pursue, maybe even going outside of my town and going to a different troop and going after that that elusive Eagle Scout that only a few people have the gumption to get, and the moxie, because it's for somebody that, there's an age limit on that. You can't, I can't do it now. You have to, what is it, 17? I think is 17 or 18 is the age limit on that, and for most kids that age, that's not what they're geared towards. They're doing other stuff too. So I do regret not following up with that. Now that I think of that, it reminds me of what I ultimately wanted to do when I got out of school was I was going to join the military, and I went down and signed up for the Navy. Because both my grandparents were in. They both served for 20 plus years. My grandpa, my dad's side was in the Air Force, and my grandpa on my mom's side was in the Navy for 22 years. So I wanted to go. I was going to join the Navy, and so I did. So I went down and started going through the process, and they were going to send me to MEPS in Omaha. Go down and get a physical, and I had a date to go do that, but I wrecked a motorcycle. I think it was about a week and a half before I was going to go down and take my physical. I did go. I messed my knee up, and I still have problems with it. I've had a couple surgeries on my knee because of that and other injuries. But so I went down. I took my physical, and I couldn't get through. There was some duck walk and some stuff like that I just couldn't do with my knee. So failed my physical, and instead of pursuing getting better and going back and trying again, I had to get a job because I was out of school, didn't have any money. I wasn't going to college at the time. So I got a job and I started working, and that led into, well, you need to go to college, from my mom. So I went to school. So I was almost in the Navy, but had a little motorcycle spill. And it wasn't even my motorcycle. My brother had it. It was some other kids, and I wrecked it. So yeah, there was that.
Do you golf or do you tennis? Anything?
No, I'm not really a golfer. I played football in high school. Being a smaller school, we got wrestling, a wrestling team when I was a senior finally, and I tried to wrestle, but by that time, every other senior, my weight group was, they'd been wrestling all their lives, so I was not good at wrestling. I got we were getting picked on by several kids around town for a while, and my mom got us into martial arts at a pretty young age, and I took some taekwondo classes in grade school, and got out of it for a while. In junior high, I got into cars and girls and stuff like that, and built had a couple Camaros in high school, but then I got back into martial arts when I was in high school, and I studied martial arts through Mike and Vicki Nyman out of Hastings, Nebraska. They have a school in Grand Island. They used to have one in Kearney, and I guess you mentioned accomplishments. That's one thing that I guess I would think of those when I got my black belt it was kind of a big deal. I think I was 19 years old, and for me it was a big deal at the time. So studied martial arts for a while and did a lot of touring tournament stuff around in my kind of early 20s, and had fun doing that. But then it all quit. I quit doing everything else when I started working at a bar. That actually consumed my life. I quit working my regular day job, and I just worked full time at a bar for about 12 years in Kearney. I had some other jobs during the day, off and on, but I worked at the Dome Lounge in Kearney, Nebraska for about 12 years, and made a really good living doing that, and played a lot of pool and foosball and drank a lot, and I guess I'm kind of glad that I'm not doing that anymore. There was a lot going on. I was playing some music and stuff, but my life was kind of centered around my job, which was drinking with people that I knew, when they came in the bar. So I still like going to the bars. I don't drink near as what I used to. Like I said, I quit drinking for a long time. Just kind of got out of that scene and kind of hung out with some different people. But I don't mind having a few beers now and then. I love a few shots of Jägermeister now and again. I love whiskey, Irish whiskey. PBR. It's kind of irritating. I'm not like a mainstream type guy. I like to be edgy and like, oh, that's mainstream, so I don't like that. And once everybody started drinking PBR, it really pissed me off. That PBR became such a big thing, even like nationwide. Its sales like exploded in the last 10 years. So, yeah. First beer I remember the first beer I ever drank. My dad had a can of Budweiser in the fridge, and I was young. I don't know how old, but I remember having trouble getting it open, and when I opened it, it like foamed all over. And I remember that first drink of ice cold Budweiser. Man, that was terrible. It was just terrible. I was a little kid, like not knowing what to expect.
Not a Budweiser guy. My buddy John's a Budweiser guy, but my first alcohol was Jameson. I stole one of those little shooters of Jameson from my dad when I was in high school, and it was just the worst. Well, you're out of the drinking scene now, and you were always working, even back then. Did you travel ever? Did you ever get out and see any sights? Anything besides, not just moving, but just traveling?
Yeah. I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' growing up at their little farmhouse. That's where I'm living now, later in life. But my mom, she worked and supported my brother and I, but she also went to school. And she put herself through school and ended up getting her doctorate. She's a psychiatrist. Super proud of her for that. But like, we just never saw her. If she was never around, she was divorced, had guys kind of coming and going. But so we spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house, and we would go out on these like weekend trips. Like we'd drive up to South Dakota to see the Black Hills or see Mount Rushmore, or even just and for people who haven't been in Nebraska long or don't know Nebraska at all, Nebraska gets a bad rap because people see what's along the interstate, and what's along the interstate is just flat nothingness, really. But if you get off the interstate, there's every corner of Nebraska has some beautiful, beautiful aspect of it. I was up in Valentine for work last week, I don't know, I can't remember. But there's Smith Falls and Fort Falls and all this beautiful cliffs and sand hills, and Nebraska's beautiful. So yeah, my grandparents we would go do stuff like that. My mom took us on trips when we could. We'd go to. She always had this draw to like New Mexico, like around Taos and Albuquerque and like Angel Fire, those areas there, which it's really cool down there. Just not, she would drag us along. We were kids, but also like down into Missouri. We actually lived my mom married this guy, and he moved us down to Missouri, Osceola, Missouri, when I was in like 6th grade. And we were there for only a couple days, and my mom was like done with that dude and split. It was one of her quick marriages and divorces. So she always goes back down there and visits, which is kind of weird. But there's a lot of cool history. There's like Jesse James, the outlaw, had a lot of his hideouts down there. Lowry City, I think, was just a few miles from where we lived. If you knew this guy and could get out on his land, you could go down and see these caves and where Jesse James supposedly hid out. So that's the kind of stuff we did when we were kids. My grandpa on my biological dad's side, he was in the Air Force, and he had a little twin engine Cessna that a couple times a year, 2-3 times a year, he flew all the time, but we would load up and go out to see my cousins in Boulder, or go fly around, just go bomb around, do that. So I got to fly at a very young age. I was really young, and I remember sitting up on my knees and actually, doing a little bit of flying. They had an exchange student. She wasn't an exchange student because she wasn't in high school. It was her year between high school and college. They had this girl come over from Germany. Her name was Clara, and live with her for 6 months, and we struck up a romance. So I had planned on doing some international traveling, but we saw each other for the 6 months she was there, and then this was back when I was in my early 20s. So this is before cell phones where you could call anywhere in the world for basically nothing. So I had these long distance phone call bills for like $400 a month. So I kind of had to taper that off and never did do any international traveling there. But 10 years ago, my best friend, he was stationed in Poland and met a girl over there and had developed a relationship, and they ended up getting married. He'd asked me to be the best man in his wedding. I said, of course I will. He said, well, it's in Poland. Perfect. So we flew to Germany, spent some time in Germany. Me and the old lady, and spent a little bit of time in Germany, and then went to Poland and spent quite a little time over there, and did some traveling around. Got to see some pretty cool stuff in Poland, and that was my international over the seas trip. I've always wanted to go to several places. I love traveling. I love being there and doing everything. The getting there, like an international flight. I think that flight to Germany was like 17 hours or something. It was brutal. But been to Mexico a few times. Once with my grandparents when they were living in Phoenix. They lived here in Kearney. My grandpa was a professor at the college, and then my grandma was a teacher at a middle school, and they ended up being snowbirds or whatever, and they got a place that they would spend the winters down in Phoenix, and then eventually moved down there permanently. And I went down a few times and visited them, and my grandparents took me down to Mexico. My first trip down there, I think I was like 19 years old, and I drank some tequila in Mexico with my grandpa and my two buddies at the time. One, my Air Force buddy, and this other dude, Benji, who's passed on. They said, get us a switchblade. Mexico, you can buy switchblade in Mexico. So I did, and I bought us 3 switchblades, and I had them stuffed down my pants to get back over the border, and beep, get over here. And the guy's like, you can take these, you don't have to hide them. So I got all nervous for nothing. So I got three switchblades from Mexico. Yeah, been all over the United States. Lived in Tennessee, lived in Missouri, lived in Texas. Had a buddy in Chicago that stayed with him quite a bit. Yeah. And now I drive around Nebraska
There you go.
in my work van, living the dream, fixing things with my hand, using my brain.
Dale, anything else? Any last words?
Last words. That sounds so.
I know
permanent.
It sounds so menacing.
No, thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
it was fun.
Well, thanks for being here. We had a great time.
Hoot and Hollers, Flathead 8, November 2nd. Be a week from this Saturday. At the other side, show starts at 9 o'clock. Don't forget to have your pets spayed or neutered. Sorry, you guys might be a little too young for the Bob Barker Price is Right throwback.